Hello, and welcome to Japanese Craft Beers. Today, it's a little bit late, but better late than never, I suppose. I'm going to take a look at the beers that I found most interesting in the year 2022, in other words, last year. It was a kind of slow year for me, as I think it may have been for many people. We're in Japan, we're still winding down the coronavirus epidemic, and a lot of places are not open. A lot of events were canceled, annual events, so forth. So I rated a total of 181 separate beers, which is down quite a bit from previous years for sure. The beers I'm going to look at today are 14 beers from Kyoto Brewing Company, 2 beers from Nara Brewing Company, and 1 from Kadoya, Anker, Brewery Boston, Samuel Smith's, and Tamamura-Honten Shika beer. Okay, so that is 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 different beers. And these are beers that I rated fairly highly during the year. Let's take a look at them in order. I'd also like to give a kind of shout out to an interesting new brewery I went to visit actually, excuse me, in 2022, and that was the Good Wolf Brewery in Nara, Higashiyoshino, Nara. Very, very rural area, beautiful mountainous area. Probably the most remote brewery I've visited. About an hour or so, an hour and a half outside of Nara City, way up into the mountains. Okay, well, let's look at these beers in order. The first one is Kyoto Brewing Fuyu no Kimagure, or Winter on a Whim, 2021, and I had this at the beginning of the year. I gave this a 3.8. It was a can from the brewery. The Citra hops just kind of zoomed out immediately upon opening. This is a white IPA, by the way, so it does have some kind of citrus note to it. The aroma had some pleasant stone fruit, grapes, creamy wheat with some rather unique sort of apples, grapes, tropical fruit, so very, very, very fruity in many different ways. Kind of lightly warming. This one was a really good one, very zippy, flavorful, and refreshing. The next one is also Kyoto Brewing Haru no Kimagure, Spring on a Whim, 2022. This is an IPA, 3.8, and the Kimagure series is largely IPAs. And this was also a can from the brewery, and the nose was lightly fruity with some caramel and hints of sort of overripe peaches and some mint. It was a very pretty dark amber color with a half a finger of frothy white foam. And it had flavors of caramel, rich stone fruit, and it was quite tangy and bitter in mid-palate here. So this one had Cascade and Centennial hops, and this was kind of truly like an IPA from about 20 or 30 years ago. The next one was also Kyoto Brewing, and this was Natsu no Kimagure, Summer on a Whim, 2022. And this is an IPA, but a session IPA. And I gave this also a 3.8. The hops were deep and fruity, a little bit dank and maybe weed-like. And the flavors are similar, but a bit thinner than in the nose, with plenty of citrus and tropical notes coming in after mid-palate. And the hops really were shining in that one. The next one is Kyoto Brewing Shintenchi, or New Frontier, version 6. And this was their look at the Pilsner style. And this was Czech Pilsner. And the Pils malt was quite strong in the aroma, very nice and bready, with a mild, fragrant Zatz hop stickiness. And it was pastel yellow, sweet initial flavor, and then it was grainy and still a little bit sweet with some malt and mid-palate. Then very mild bitterness, and it leveled out a bit. Very spicy, sort of dry finish. And this was a really nice Pils from Kyoto Brewing. The next one's also Kyoto Brewing, and it's called Kyoto Brewing Yushu Kanbi, or they translated as Nightcap. And this was a triple, Belgian-style triple, and I gave this a 3.8 as well. This was a can, and the Belgian yeasty aroma was quite strong with a lot of overripe stone fruit. The initial flavor was rather sugary sweet, and it was moderated with a small yeasty bite. They had mikan peel in it, and it was quite evident in the flavor. And this gave it kind of an unusual citrusy note for a triple, but it worked, and it was very tasty, and the alcohol was quite well hidden. It was very, very dangerously drinkable. Good night, everyone. The next one is from Nara Brewing, and this is Nara Brewing Function. Nara Brewing is also one of my favorite breweries in Japan. And this was a Belgian pale ale, farmhouse style. And the aroma had a load of mosaic hops, some white wine, light stone fruit, and saison yeast. It was very clearly a saison in the flavor, but one which included some really big jumps of tropical fruit and white wine. Very, very pleasant, and had some unusual hops in it. I really love this one. The next one was a non-Japanese beer, and this was Pauwel Kwak from Brewery Boston, and which is owned by AB InBev, and the company that does Anheuser-Busch Budweiser. This is a Belgian ale, and a strong dark one, and I hadn't seen this for years. I used to see it around occasionally, and then it suddenly showed up in a local liquor store. And this is the aroma was had a mild, musty sort of fruitiness with some grapes, apples, and pear. The flavors were kind of rounded and fruity. The malty initial was sort of replaced by a clear flavor of pear and apple. Very nice palate changes, and this was a really refreshing Belgian ale. The next one is Kyoto Brewing 6 Journeys. Excuse me, my cat's coming in. Okay, let me start again. My cat was coming in to eat. And the next one is Kyoto Brewing 6 Journeys, number 1, and this was a German IPA. And in this series, this Six Journeys series, the Kyoto Brewing is looking at how the IPA might be integrated with features of different countries, different cultures, brewing traditions. In this case, Germany. This was a can from the brewery, and the aroma was quite grassy, almost dank, and a bit pungent. It had some sharp hints of kind of freshly cut weeds. The malt was kind of biscuity and grainy with some overripe stone fruit as well. And then it had more of the greeniness, the weediness sort of moving in from the aroma. Very tasty, very rich, loaded with hops. Very unusual IPA. I think this certainly gave us something new in the world of beer. Our next one is Nara Brewing Wild Ambitions. And this is, in the initial aroma, we had a lot of mosaic coming out, fresh and zesty. Lots of citrus blossoms on the side as well. And we had the flavors were quite similar to the aroma, with a lot of caramel and more nice hopping. This was their 4th anniversary beer, Nara Brewing, and it was really tasty. Great hop combination in both the aroma and the flavor. The next one is kind of a classic, which I've had in the past, and but hadn't seen for a while, and it suddenly showed up in a supermarket. And this is Samuel Smith's Taddy Porter, very dark brown, of course, with 2 fingers of dark tan, blocky, chalky kind of foam. The aroma is kind of delicate and fruity. In the initial, mostly some dark fruit, and of course roast malt and light coffee. The roast malt turned to dark fruit in the mid-palate, something like mild prunes maybe, and then to a lighter, a sweeter sort of fruit. Kind of medium body and dry in the finish. It's not a terribly complex beer, but it is really delicious. Okay, and next we go to Belgium again here, and this is Het Anker Gouden Carolus Tripel from Brewery Anchor. And this was a bottle. There goes my cat. Hang on a second. Okay, so Brewery Anchor, and this one had a kind of dusty aroma of ripe apples and peaches. Very sweet, sort of lightly floral initial flavor with some bready, kind of cake-like even. And it had certainly a kind of wit beer characteristic, which was, for me, unusual for a triple. It does have coriander and orange peel. Really nice flavor changes in this one throughout. And I think this one is probably right up there with Westmalle as among the best Belgian triples in the world. The next one was an unusual one from Ise Kadoya in Mie Prefecture, and it's called Ise Kadoya Neko, Shika, Shinjirarenai. And that means basically believe in cats only. And it's a double IPA, or double hazy IPA, quite strong. And I bought this one in Ise, the town of Ise. It had a very pungent, stunning, and very far-reaching sort of nose of Citra and Mosaic hops. And its flavors kind of started out light and fuzzy with a citrus note, and then some very sharp stone fruit. The bitterness builds and then really kicks in during late mid-palate. Medium to heavy body, it's actually a bit syrupy, so there was a lot going on in this beer. A very, very strong double IPA or Imperial IPA. And the next is another strong one from Kyoto Brewing, and this is Kyoto Brewing Shinsen Chui, or they call it Dark Impact. And it's an Imperial Stout. And this is probably the highest, it was 12%, the highest alcohol beer that they've produced to date here. It had aromas of dark chocolate, light coffee, very rich dark fruit. It poured out very viscous, oil-like, and with a thick dark brown color. And the carbonation is somewhat hidden in all this darkness, but it seemed to be kind of rushing up, really kind of hot and heavy. The chocolate flavor is strong, medium dark roast, and there was no char, no burnt aspect to it, and dark fruit. So this is creamy on the tongue and even a little buttery. So the alcohol warmth is quite distinct, and it kind of settles on the tongue as well. Very, very tasty beer. The next one is from Kyoto Brewing as well. This is Kyoto Brewing Akane, Belgian Imperial Red Ale. And it's classified as a Belgian strong dark ale. This was very, very dark mahogany with a very fat finger of tan foam. The aroma was dark fruit, dried cherries, Belgian ale yeast, and it had flavors of very rich roasted malt, more dark fruit, and the cherries and plums, and even some chocolate, and some umami as well in the mid-palate. The alcohol is certainly much more apparent in the flavor than it was in aroma. The palate changes were gradual, and the flavors blended really nicely. This was much more heavily hopped than many beers in this style. Quite exceptional, but from this brewery, not surprising. They are doing all kinds of interesting things. Then our penultimate beer is also Kyoto Brewing Kodo o Yuku Kodama, or they translate it as Pilgrim's Respite. So the image of a pilgrim walking along the old post road, sitting down for a rest. And this is a barrel-aged version of that beer. Saison Farmhouse, and I rated this one 4.2. And I made this one a personal toast to our friend Justin, who left us in 2022. The aroma was Brett yeast right away, and although the bottle had been aged for over 2 years, it seemed fresh and wasn't kind of the bready horse blanket note that we expect. A nice grassy initial note, and then some light peach and apple, and it was topped off with gentle tinges of Brett yeast as well. Very rich fruit flavors. This was a special treat, and I dedicate it again to Justin. The final beer, and this was not by far, but pretty close to by far, 4.4 out of 5. The best beer for me out of the year was Tamamura-Honten Yamabushi Saison 1, and this was their batch 1705. And this was from Shiga Kogen Beer up in Yamanouchi in Nagano Prefecture. And this is a Saison farmhouse style, and some people have called it a super saison, 9% alcohol. And this was a bottle from the brewery and a gift from a friend, thanks Al. And I stored it for about 2 years. It had already been stored for a while. They bottle condition many of their beers. And so it opened up with a big crack, like a rifle shot. And the beer came out in the glass as golden, hazy straw color, with lots of fast streams of carbonation rushing up, and just a perfectly packed spongy head of white foam. If you've ever poured out a glass of Duvel, it's something similar to that. The initial aroma had wonderful esters, and then some loads of baskets full of peaches and pears, lots of stone fruit in the first sips, and then some streams of honey as well, and very light bitterness from mid-palate to finish. It was very smooth and rich on the tongue. Kind of hard to do justice to this one in description. You know, it really is. It was a smile in a glass for me. It was my 1000th video review as well, and please check out these barrel-conditioned beers from Shika, Tamamura-Honten. They're quite exceptional. Okay, well that's it. Those are the beers that I really liked in 2017. I hope you have a chance to try some of them if you haven't already, and let me know what you think about them. And subscribe to the channel. Let's have a conversation together about great beer. That's it. Bye bye.